Good morning. I'm Stephen Leake. I'm an elder at First Presbyterian Church of Mesquite, Texas, and I'm also the teacher of the Discipleship Sunday School class there. Today we're continuing with our lesson on the Gospel of John. Now, just to remind you, we're using the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, and also for our study guide, we're using the Daily Bible Study Series on the book of John, written by Professor William Barclay. Last week we finished the study of the cleansing of the temple as recorded in the book of John. And today we're going to talk about what happened immediately after the cleansing of the temple, the reaction not only of the disciples, but of the temple rulers. So here we go, chapter 2, verses 17 through 22. His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years. And you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. Well, it was quite certain that an act like the cleansing of the temple would produce an immediate reaction in those that saw it happen. It was not the kind of thing that anyone could look at with complete indifference. Here we have two different reactions. First, there's the reaction of the disciples, which was to remember Psalm 69, verse 9. This psalm was taken to refer to the Messiah. When the Messiah came, he would be burned up with a zeal for the house of God. When this verse leapt into their minds, it meant that the conviction that Jesus was the Messiah had seized the minds of the disciples even more deeply and more definitely. Now they were sure that Jesus was, in fact, the anointed one of God. Second, there's the reaction of the Jews. They asked Jesus what right he had to act like that and demanded that he should at once prove his credentials by showing some sign. The point is, they acknowledged the act of Jesus to be that of one who claimed to be the Messiah. It was always expected that when the Messiah came, he would confirm his claims by doing some amazing things. False messiahs did in fact arise and promised to cleave the waters of the Jordan in two or make the walls of a city collapse at just a word. The popular idea of the Messiah was connected with wonders. So the Jews said, "By this act of yours you have publicly claimed to be the Messiah. Now show us some wonder which will prove your claim." Jesus' reply constitutes the great problem of this passage. What did he really say? And more importantly, what did he really mean? We must remember that verses 21 and 22 are John's interpretation written long afterwards. He was invariably reading into the passage ideas which were the product of 70 years of thinking about and experience with the risen Christ. As Irenaeus said long ago, no prophecy is fully understood until after the fulfillment of it. But what did Jesus originally say, and what did he originally mean? There's no doubt that Jesus spoke words which were very much like these. They turned out to be words which could be maliciously twisted into a destructive claim. In fact, when Jesus was on trial, the false witness borne against him was, This fellow said, I'm able to destroy the temple and to rebuild it in 3 days. That from Matthew 26, verse 61. And the charge leveled against Stephen was, we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and will change the customs that Moses handed on to us. We must remember two things, and then we must put them together. First, Jesus never said that he would destroy the material temple and then rebuild it. Jesus, in fact, looked for the end of the temple. In John 4:21, with that beautiful discourse with the woman at the well in Samaria, he said that the day was coming when God would be worshipped neither in Mount Gerizim nor in Jerusalem, but in spirit and truth. Second, the cleansing of the temple, as we have seen, was a dramatic way of showing that the whole temple worship with its ritual and sacrifice was irrelevant and could do nothing to lead people to God. So it is clear that Jesus did expect that the temple would pass away, that he had come to render its worship unnecessary and obsolete. Therefore, he would never suggest that he would rebuild it. We must now turn to Mark, as so often we find a little extra suggestive and illuminating phrase there. As Mark relates the charge against Jesus, it ran, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands. What Jesus really meant was that his coming had put an end to the way of worshiping God that was made and arranged according to human design, and had put into its place a spiritual worship. Further, he put an end to all this business of animal sacrifice and priestly ritual, and put in its place a direct approach to the Spirit of God, which did not need an elaborately built temple and a ritual of incense and sacrifice offered by human hands. The threat of Jesus was, your temple worship, your elaborate ritual, and your lavish animal sacrifices are at an end, because I have come. The promise of Jesus was, I will give you a way to come to God without all this human elaboration and human ritual. Jesus came to make the temple in Jerusalem irrelevant and to make the whole earth a temple where it is possible to know the presence of the living God. And the Jews saw that. It was in 19 BC that Herod had begun to build that temple. It was not until AD 64 that the building was finally finished. In today's lesson, it was 46 years since it had been started. And it was to be another 40 years before it ended. Jesus shattered the Jews by telling them that all its magnificence and splendor and all the money and skill that had been lavished on it were completely irrelevant. Jesus had been sent by God to show people a way to come to God without any temple at all. That must be what Jesus actually said. But in the years to come, John saw far more than that in Jesus' words. John saw in it nothing less than a prophecy of the resurrection. And he was right. He was right for this basic reason, that the earth could never become the temple of the living God until Jesus was released from the body and was present everywhere. When that happened, he would be with men and women everywhere, even to the end of the world. It's the presence of the living, risen Christ which makes the whole world into the temple of God. So John says that when they remembered, they saw in this a promise of the resurrection. Well, they did not see it at the time. They could not. It was only their own experience of the living Christ which one day showed them the true depth of what Jesus said. Finally, John says that they believe the scripture. We have here the tremendous truth that our contact with God, our entry into his presence, and our approach to him are not dependent on anything that human hands can build or human minds devise. In the street, in the home, at business, on the hills, on the open road, or in church, we have our inner temple, the presence of the risen Christ forever with us throughout the world. Thank you for joining me with today's lesson. God bless.